Hello everyone, welcome back. This is S.C. Coleman, author, and in this video we will be talking about surveillance. Specifically in relation to some of those cameras we've seen popping up around at places like, say, Kroger or on street corners. This video anyway is not going to be specifically about those flock camera, so-called, but rather this one is about those called LVT. Now, it is my assumption or theory, maybe not assumption, it's a guess, that LVT actually stands for localized video tower. But it could be a number of other things. Either way, what they're saying LVT stands for is Live View Technologies. This is the Master SaaS and Service Level Agreement. That's Sierra Alpha Alpha Sierra. So I don't know what that stands for, and it doesn't say here. Live View Technologies Incorporated, LVT, a Delaware corporation, at 802 East 1050 South Suite 300, American Fork, Utah. That's not Delaware. 84003. Now, this document has a number of these white boxes. They look similar to when somebody takes white out and then writes over it. But this was obviously made in a computer program, some type of, like, probably Microsoft Word maybe. And there's no apparent reason for those white boxes. So that is a question. It usually happens when something is pasted over, right? But it could be, well, any number of things. So customer represents and warrants that it is not a legal minor. So something that would be interesting to think about is, can companies be illegal minors? Legal minor being, on paper, you are a legal minor when you have identification stating your birth date, such as your birth certificate. And of course you're below the age of 18. So if a company is below the age of 18, does that make them a legal minor? It's an interesting question, I think. If customer is a company or other legal entity, they must represent they have the authority to bind. And I do like the interesting mention of other legal entity. I'm assuming that would reference like trusts or other sorts of investment entities, so to speak. System is granted by LVT to customer under this agreement strictly on a non-exclusive, non-transferable, non-licensable, and restricted basis only for customers' lawful internal business purposes. Conditioned upon and subject to customers' timely payment to LVT. SaaS solution is currently operated and performed from and through Amazon Web Services, the service center, and that customer data will be stored on and processed by equipment and systems at such service center. If LVT determines that such different service center or location is necessary pursuant to LVT's then current disaster recovery plan or backup plan. That sounds like, as it's said there, a plan, with the intent to carry out that plan at some point. Shall remain in effect for a period of 12 months, and thereafter this agreement shall automatically renew and continue for subsequent to 12 months. Sounds automated to me. Third-party products and services. And here's where we get into the real nice stuff here. LVT or third parties may from time to time make available to customer, make available. I think we know what that means. They will have it available to them, whether they would like it or not. That's what that means. LVT or third parties may from time to time make available to customer third-party products or services, including but not limited to third-party applications and implementation, alert response services, customizations, and other consulting services. LVT does not make any representations, warranties, or guarantees for or in connection with any such third-party products and services, or provide any maintenance, support, or assistance for any third-party products and services, whether or not they are designated by LVT as certified or otherwise. So the operative word, of course, is third-party. And in the context of what's been going on today, we could accurately call this a third-party takeover. It is, of course, treason, it's unconstitutional, it's espionage, it's fraudulent, all these other things, but it's all being done by and on behalf of third parties. These other elements are simply just cover identities. They're excuses and pretexts. They're a facade. They're the front appearance. In actuality, all this stuff is being done by and for third parties. LVT has and reserves the right to suspend customers and or any users' access to our use of the SaaS system or solution, is their word for it. That doesn't sound creepy. Hardware, software, services, and or any other components of the system. So what solution is it? What are they solving? Of course, they would say some vague crap like reduce crime, whatever that means. As LVT deems reasonably necessary to respond to any actual or potential security threat, breach, or concern, including those that may affect customers, users, or any other LVT customer or users, immediately of customer or any user access to or use of the SaaS solution, hardware, software, services, or any other components of the system is interfering with our otherwise negatively impacting third-party rights. That's what they care about. So-called third-party rights. And so-called infringement upon third-party rights is a subsequent reason to immediately, knee-jerk reaction, remove access to this so-called solution. The SaaS solution available through use of cellular data connection is selected by LVT or a satellite data connection, but it is operated through Amazon Web Services. So that's a real humdinger there, isn't it? So this is operated through Amazon Web Services, but it's done through a cellular or satellite connection. Customer will reasonably cooperate with LVT in connection with the performance of this agreement as may be deemed necessary by LVT, which may include customer making available to LVT such customer personnel and information as may be reasonably required by LVT to provide the SaaS solution, hardware, software, services, and or any of the component of the system to customer. So it's essentially speaking of third parties behind the scenes here who are attempting to harness control over so-called law enforcement elements. That's what it means when they say customer, personnel, and information. And all that stuff's going to be going to third parties. And this stuff is ridiculous. This is about as far from the U.S. Constitution as you can possibly get. You've got some hidden, unseen third-party administrator from behind the scenes manipulating and controlling the entire law enforcement so-called structure throughout the country. And of course, that law that they're enforcing is not legitimate to begin with. Customers and its users' access may require customer and users to install certain integration software on customers and users' computers, networks, or systems, or may require customer and user to install certain LVT mobile software on customer and users' mobile devices, which access and use shall be subject to terms and conditions of this agreement. Well, isn't that amazing? Just amazing. LVT may increase the fees in any schedule by up to 5% for any subsequent renewal period of such schedule. All such fees are paid by customer to LVT United States dollars. Any such fees not paid by customer to LVT when due shall accrue interest at the lesser of 1.5% per month or the maximum interest rate allowed by applicable law. I always love to reference applicable law. until the overdue amount has been paid in full by customer to LVT. No refund or return of any fees paid by customer to LVT under this agreement shall be due or payable in any amount on account of such expiration or termination. Customers shall not withhold or offset any fees payments due under any schedule. Customers shall not be entitled to, and LVT shall not grant but to customer any applicable credits as determined by LVT toward any fees that are claimed or requested by customer from LVT more than 90 days after the date such credits first become creditable to customer. The fees due from or payable by customer to LVT under such each schedule do not include any applicable taxes, levies, duties, or similar governmental assessments or charges of any nature, including but not limited to value-added goods and services, harmonized sales, use, or withholding taxes, assessable by any local, state, provincial, federal, or foreign government or jurisdiction, collectively taxes. Customer is solely responsible and liable for paying any and all taxes, excluding only taxes payable by LVT based on LVT's net income. So, of course, most of those entities that they're calling customer are all don't pay taxes, right? Because they're the tax collectors. So and here we got minimum insufficient funds NSF charge of $35. Customer acknowledges and agrees that it shall be responsible and liable for and shall reimburse LVT for any and all costs, expenses, fees, and other amounts, including collection expenses, court costs, and reasonable attorney's fees incurred by LVT to enforce any of customers' fees payment obligations to LVT under this agreement and any schedule. Customers shall not permit any users nor any third party or individual to reverse engineer, decompile, disassemble, or otherwise attempt to discover or discern the source code, object code, or underlying structure, ideas, or algorithms of the SaaS solution. LVT and its personnel shall use reasonable efforts when at customer's location to perform services in compliance with customers' reasonable policies and guidelines regarding site safety and security that have been provided in writing by customer to LVT reasonably in advance of LVT's personnel arrival at the relevant customer location. Boy, that sounds like they're really scared. We're not even going to show up unless you have explained to us that your area is safe. Right? That's exactly how they would, I think, how they would sound. Very sort of snot-nosed and haughty types of individuals. They're your third party, possibly even attorneys. It's hard to say at this point. Sometimes, of course, they're attorneys, but I think in general they're just the elevated counselors, right? The people that sit on boards, the banksters, the academicians, or educationists, as Richard Mitchell calls them. They're the clergy, right? Of course, you're going to have attorneys up in there, and just PhDs. It's the usual types of miscreant, holier than thou, new nobility types of people. LVT's obligations and liabilities provided for in this section shall not apply to any customer claim arising from or in connection with any negligence or misconduct of customer, or of any other individuals who are not LVT employees or agents providing the services to customer under this agreement. Now, why would it say that there are individuals, not LVT employers or agents, that will be providing services? That seems kind of strange. The only thing I can think of is that applies to subcontracts, but there wouldn't a subcontractor be an agent or employee? Very weird. LVT does not represent or warrant that the SaaS services, hardware, software, services, or any other components of the system or any third-party products and services will not be compromised and or circumvented. So they might be compromised from the get-go on purpose. Another thing here to note is that this starts these sections where everything is in all caps. The disclaimers and limitations of liability in this section shall also be applicable to LVT's affiliates, suppliers, licensors, and or third-party service providers. So they're providing a service which is provided by third parties. it's a third-party occupation. LVT shall have the right to terminate this agreement and/or any schedule and/or discontinue any SaaS solution if LVT is unable or it is impracticable for LVT to obtain or maintain any components of the system to transmit signals between the customer's locations or premises and LVT's designated locations or premises. LVT in its sole discretion determines results in an undue number of false alarms or malfunctions for or in connection with the hardware and or other components. It's nice that they can just determine that at their sole discretion, as they say. Wait, which page am I on? I believe, yes, okay. We're all good, on track. LVT shall at its option have the right to take immediate possession of the hardware and charge customer for LVT's costs and expenses to collect the hardware plus a 1% service charge on all such amounts or declared immediately due and payable without additional notice, presentment, or demand. Under this agreement, the term confidential information means any information or data disclosed, provided, or made available by one party, disclosing party, to the other party, receiving party, that is marked or labeled as confidential or proprietary. Customer data and customer personal data are hereby deemed to be customer confidential information. So that's probably going to be how they determine the recording and collected information that they are, of course, doing at their own volition, treasonously, and obviously without any sort of constitutional paying attention to it. But there's other concerns here, which we'll get into. So that the collected information is already just deemed confidential. The SaaS solution, hardware, software, devices, documentation, and other components of the system are hereby deemed to be LVT confidential information. This agreement and the schedules are hereby deemed to be LVT confidential information. The receiving party agrees it shall not disclose or provide any confidential information of the disclosing party to any third party or individual other than receiving party's employees, agents, and contractors, representatives, with a need to know such confidential information of the disclosing party and who have entered into written non-disclosure and non-use agreements with the receiving party provided for protection of the disclosing party's confidential information. This all sounds very military. The receiving party shall, upon expiration or termination of this agreement, or otherwise upon the written request of the disclosing party to the receiving party, properly return to the disclosing party or destroy, if so instructed by the disclosing party, and provide written certification to the disclosing party of such return or destruction of all confidential information of the disclosing party without retaining any copy, extract, or summary of any part thereof. And of course, these people are going to retain all kinds of stuff, but they'll just certify it in writing, right? But they'll keep it. They always keep it, which means it can always be seized, of course, if you can find it. Customer acknowledges and agrees that LVT, its affiliates, suppliers, or licensors exclusively own and retain any and all intellectual property rights into or relating to the SaaS solution, hardware, software, services, documentation, and any and all other components of the system. That, of course, includes the information that was collected, including any and all derivative works thereof. Yep. So everything that they collect, they say, is our intellectual property, which is a very broad claim. Does that mean that gives them the ability to claim intellectually property rights over people's faces or appearance, because their appearance is collected on these cameras and therefore their derivative works? The appearance is a derivative work of their product, so therefore they have intellectual property rights over everybody's appearance who walks in front of these cameras. That's how these people think. Customer and users hereby waive any and all claims they may have now or may hereafter have in the future in any country or jurisdiction to so-called rental rights, moral rights, and all rights of droit moral. Well, this person, whoever wrote this, is clearly an idiot, because droit is French for right. So it looks like they just stated moral rights twice. Third-party AI services. Some components of the system incorporate AI technology provided by third parties, the third-party AI providers. Customers' use of such products and services is subject to the disclaimers in this section and to any additional terms imposed by the applicable third-party AI providers. LVT does not control those providers and disclaims all liability for their performance, availability, security, data practices, and compliance with applicable laws. Yeah, applicable laws, my ass. Notwithstanding anything in this agreement or any schedule to the contrary, customers shall not use export or re-export or allow the export or re-export of the SaaS solution, hardware, services, documentation, and or any other components of the system or anything related thereto to any direct product thereof in violation of blah 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 blah. So we all know what that means. They certainly do love to hide behind phony rules and regulations and pretend like everything they're doing is above board. And if you read into these things and you just assume the truth of stuff just on its face, despite of course criticizing everyone else, but if you read it, then it's legal and therefore it must be so, right? You have a lot of people who are brainwashed into the idea of the sanctity of legality, meaning if it's written down, therefore it's true. Of course, those same people will say not to believe everything you read on the internet. There's a lot of misinformation out there. But if those people got their hands on this document, they would read through it and just say, oh yeah, this is totally normal. No problem here. Very weird. Very weird indeed. But that is the consequence of the brainwashing operation, as many call it. I use other words for it. There are very good words for it. Richard Mitchell called it, it comes out of the cardinal principles for educationism. But either way, what we're looking at here is treason under the color of law. That's the term for it in the U.S. Code. Well, technically the U.S. Code is deprivation of rights under the color of law. And so here they got all this moronic stuff about rights written into here so they can say, well, we're not depriving you of rights, right? And they never recognized the U.S. Constitution to begin with anyway, which is the supreme law of the land, and all members that swear allegiance to it, being those of the U.S. Armed Forces, are bound or compelled to act against this type of garbage going on. So of course here we get into the force majeure clause, which as usual is an actual force majeure clause. So I feel like I need to preface that by saying what a force majeure clause is. It is a contingency plan. It is, if this happens, we will do this, right? It means if you're a merchant shipping products and your ship gets lost at sea, you will have a stockpile or somebody else will facilitate a new shipment of similar products. That is a force majeure clause. A force majeure clause is not, if something happens, we'll just continue doing it when feasibly possible and it will forever be done, no matter what. That's not what force majeure is. Force majeure means something happens making you actually incapable of doing whatever it is you were meant to do. And normally these force majeure clauses and all these stupid documents aren't actual force majeure clauses. They're not contingency plans. They're just stupid declarations saying we're going to ignore reality and we're going to declare that we can continue doing what we're doing no matter what. This paperwork does not exist in the realm of reality. Force majeure event. The party whose performance of its obligations under this agreement or any schedule is prevented or delayed by a force majeure event. So now, of course, they're trying to even reduce down the idea of having reality being done to you. Shall give written notice thereof to the other parties, stating the period of time the occurrence of the force majeure event is expected to continue. Yeah, imagine that. Your expectation for how long a hurricane or occupatory force mechanism telling you you're not allowed to do something. It's ridiculous. And the affected party shall use diligent efforts to end the failure or delay and minimize the effects of such force majeure event on the performance of its obligations under this agreement and applicable schedules. That is not a force majeure clause. That has no contingency plan in there. That's just not recognizing what the term force majeure means, which is major force. And of course, considering the fact the person used droit moral and then also stated moral rights, this could have been written by a computer program, but computer programs tend to know French. Well, some of them. So this was probably written by some brain-dead attorney who doesn't know anything about French, even though in the past all the attorneys, or so-called attorneys, they would have been lawyers, meaning those that practice law and etc. And all of these words have got screwed up. In the past, all individuals who knew about laws and tradition and custom and all those things and were very articulate and competent, they all spoke French and knew French. And I expect the original U.S. Constitution was written in French. This agreement and the schedule shall be governed by the laws of the state of Delaware. The parties agree that any dispute between the parties arising from or relating to this agreement or any schedule shall be brought in a court of competent jurisdiction in the state of Utah. Now, isn't that kind of strange? So basically, if you want to sue this company, right? Just this company, of course, because the third parties are all disclaimed from this document, and so you try to sue those third parties, and they're all going to say we've been disclaimed. It's just ridiculous, even though the actual people controlling, operating, and conducting this whole nonsense are third parties. Well, anyway, if you want to sue this company, then you have to sue them in Utah, but according to the so-called laws of the state of Delaware. Yeah, that is bogus and moronic, definitely fraudulent. It's just completely ridiculous. And the system is built to facilitate such ridiculousness. But more importantly, as we'll get into it, this is all built around foreign interests, foreign third parties, which of course makes it treason. Here's the data protection addendum. They are really focused on so-called protection of data, secrecy, and site security. For when they want the dog and pony show when their lordlings come to visit their overseas land holdings, right? That's what the United States is. It's an overseas land holding for foreign enemies. Sub-processor means any person or entity, including any third party and any LVT affiliate, but excluding LVT employees appointed by or on behalf of LVT to process customer data on behalf of any customer group member, or that LVT otherwise makes customer data available for a business purpose. Yeah, just as long as it's stated as a business purpose is all that matters. Customer data collected by LVT on behalf of a customer group member. That's an interesting word there. Customer group member. Other than for providing the SaaS solution services or as otherwise set forth in the master agreement as directed by customer or as otherwise required by data protection laws. Yeah, right. Any notice or method used by LVT in connection with the collection of customer data by LVT must be consistent with LVT's obligations in the master agreement, this DPA. Any such notice or method must be consistent with LVT being a service provider or processor to customer. That's just stipulating an arbitrary designation. It's in quotation marks, and it just means, put that on there. Say that, and that's all that matters as long as it's said. If the master agreement permits LVT to de-identify or anonymize customer data or create or use aggregate data, subject information collectively de-identify data, LVT must do so in a way that it no longer meets the applicable data protection law's definition of personal information and in a manner that cannot be reconstructed to identify any customer group member. LVT will A, take reasonable measure to ensure that the de-identified data cannot be associated with a natural person or customer group member. LVT shall implement reasonable safeguards designed to ensure that access to customer data is restricted to only those LVT personnel who have a need to know such information to enable LVT to perform its obligations under the master agreement and this DPA. LVT's personnel engaged in the processing of customer data shall be informed of the confidential nature of the customer data, have received training regarding their responsibilities with respect to customer data comprising personal information, and are aware of their obligations of confidentiality with respect to personal information. Further, LVT will take reasonable steps to ensure the reliability, integrity, and trustworthiness of all of LVT's personnel with access to customer data. LVT must at all times implement reasonable and appropriate technical and organizational measures designed to safeguard customer data against unauthorized or illegal access, illegal, of course, meaning not reduced to writing, destruction, use, modification, processing, copying, or disclosure of any accidental loss, destruction, or damage, including but not limited to the security compliance requirements set forth in Appendix A security compliance requirements. Attached to this DPA, LVT must document those measures in writing and periodically review them at least annually to ensure they remain current and complete. Further, LVT must take reasonable precautions to preserve the integrity of any personal information it processes and to prevent any corruption or loss of the personal information, including but not limited to establishing effective backup and data restoration procedures. LVT will within 48 hours notify customer if it becomes aware of any security incident. Upon becoming aware of any security incident, LVT will take prompt action to reasonably contain, mitigate risks and further harm, and recover from the security incident in a manner that preserves relevant evidence and can support an appropriate subsequent investigation. LVT will also reasonably cooperate with and provide assistance to customer to support customers' review, investigation, response to the security incident. This coordination may include assisting with any forensic investigation or review of the incident, providing customer with physical access to any facilities and operations affected, facilitating interviews with LVT and its sub-processor personnel, former employees, and others involved in the matter as may be appropriate, and D, making available all relevant and non-privileged records, logs, files, data reporting, forensic reports, and other materials required to comply with all data protection laws or as otherwise reasonably required by customer. LVT will cover all reasonable expenses associated with the performance of the obligations under this section unless the matter arose from the customer's specific instructions, negligence, willful default, or breach of this DPA, in which case customer will cover all such reasonable expenses. LVT will also reimburse customer for actual reasonable blah blah blah. Cross-border transfers. LVT shall store customer data on servers or equipment located in the United States. However, LVT may authorize sub-processors located outside the United States to process customer data. What did I tell you? They are foreign enemies. Their purpose, of course, is to do a broad mass surveillance system and collection across the entire country with foreign interests at the heart of it, and they consider everyone here to be their property, which they can do with as they please, but they themselves want special protections to make sure that they're safe. It's very obvious what the perspective is behind this activity. LVT maintains control over all customer data and trusts the sub-processor. Subject to the terms and conditions of Section 6.1 and 6.2, a sub-processor located outside the United States may view, monitor, and otherwise process customer data. However, no sub-processor will download customer data to any system, service, or other equipment physically located outside of the United States, except they are going to exactly do that. On expiration or termination of this master agreement, for any reason within 30 calendar days of receipt of the request or expiration or termination of the master agreement, LVT will securely destroy, or if directly in writing by customer, return and not retain all or any customer data in its possession or control, except that LVT may temporarily retain one copy made for backup purposes in the ordinary course, provided that such archive copy will be subject to the ongoing obligations contained herein and shall be destroyed upon the normal expiration of backup files. And of course that doesn't apply to so-called derivative works, which according to this nonsense is intellectual property of the LVT and therefore the foreign third-party sub-processors. May and only use this retained customer data for the required retention, reason, or audit purposes. Upon request, LVT will certify in writing that has destroyed the customer data. Oh yeah, that's enough. Just write down, it's been destroyed. And that's all that matters, right? During the term and 2 years after this DPA terminates, upon reasonable written request of customer, upon at least 30 days notice, LVT shall allow and cooperate with reasonable assessments by customer or customer's third-party representatives to evaluate LVT's compliance with the terms of this DPA. The notice requirements herein will not apply if customer reasonably believes that a security incident has occurred or is occurring, or LVT is in breach of any of its obligations under this DPA. Customer will limit its right to conduct assessments of LVT to no more than once per calendar year unless customer reasonably believes that a security incident has occurred or is occurring. So the idea of here, of course, is that you have the so-called checks and balances. The customer will check on the LVT, and the LVT will check on the customer, and they will balance the balance sheet, right? The money, all that stuff working together, and all of this done on behalf of foreign third-party interests, who do not trust anyone, who are exceptionally paranoid, and they don't, and this is obviously not something being written by the alleged entity that it's for. This is being written from a third-party perspective, writing essentially directions for LVT and the customer, so-called, which of course, as we all know who the customers, so-called, really are. At least once per year during the term, LVT will conduct site audits of its personal information processing practices and the information technology and information security controls for all facilities and systems used to comply with its obligations under this DPA, including but not limited to obtaining a network-level vulnerability assessment performed by a recognized third-party audit firm based on recognized industry practices. Upon customer's written request to LVT, LVT will make all of the relevant security audit reports available to customer for review, which may include, as applicable, statement on standards for attestation engagements, SSAE, number 18 audit reports for reporting on controls at a service organization, reports relating to its ISO IEC 27001 certification, and other similar reports. Customer will treat such audit reports as LVT's confidential information under the master agreement. Appendix A, Security Compliance Requirements. These security compliance requirements apply to all customer data which is A, processed by LVT, B, provided by on or behalf of the customer to LVT, learned or otherwise used by LVT in connection with the performance of services, or D, otherwise collected or gathered from customer in connection with the services. In all events with respect to customer data, LVT shall follow industry practice of ISO 27002 2005. ISO is the International Standards Organization. Any entity that follows the International Standards Organization is violating the U.S. constitutional section stating that only Congress shall set the standards of weights and measures. Obviously, these standards are being set by foreign interests, and anyone that follows them is violating the Constitution, and among other things, they're engaging in this heinous activity. Very heinous, very criminal, very treasonous, right? But that's what ISO is, the International Standards Organization. It's allegedly comes out of Switzerland. Encrypt, utilizing AES-GSM, that's a system for a cellular system. 256-bit encryption or better. Customer data, if it is stored on network infrastructure owned and or managed by LVT, or on any approved cloud-hosted infrastructure, or where personal information is transmitted over the internet or on a portable device. When deleting customer data, LVT shall comply with NIST Guidelines for Media Sanitization, Draft SP 800-88. Implement multi-factor authentication for any external access to any internal network where customer data is accessible. Notify the Customer Information Security Organization promptly of any security incident by sending email to a designated email provided by customer to LVT in writing. In addition to notifying the primary business contact at customer, such notification must be made in conformance with the timing requirements set forth in the DPA. The notification requirements and recipients in this section 2F are in addition to the notification requirements and obligations in the main body of the DPA. Provide certification of compliance with the applicable security compliance requirements by either obtaining such certification from an independent information security service company or through an annual self-assessment and certification as approved by customer. Provide written certification to customer that customer data has been destroyed in accordance with the requirements of this Appendix A. So the contact information for sending a report of a security breach has to be done in writing, separate from the system and network. So that way, if somebody breaches and hacks this network and takes it over, they won't know through which so-called email the notification is being sent. Of course, you can't believe anything ever written in here. They change it at will. They do all kinds of stuff. So, it might not even be an email. It's hard to say. But for operational purposes, considering a large number of minions operate based off of this fraudulent, phony paperwork, there are certain things contained in these documents that they cannot simply change. Once it's written down, it becomes a procedural manual and starts to be followed. And therefore, it gives you the idea of how it's being done. And it is still very likely that all of these systems are continue to be operated off the Amazon Web Services. And there's obviously going to be other elements still in practice, including naturally the fact that third parties are the ones operating behind it, and in the controlled fraudulent system we have today, there is no way that you can play the game against them because they write the rules. So for LiveView Technologies Incorporated, the business filing, of course, this is foreign third-party interest. So naturally, the business filing paperwork is just immediately going to be fraudulent. So the date of this paperwork is 10/21/2024. The return address listed is Kate Fisher, 1121 Old Concord Road, Suite 13, Salisbury, North Carolina 28146. That's LiveView Technologies Incorporated, and this document is from the state of Ohio. It's a permanent license. It states that the company was formed under the jurisdiction of Delaware March 1st, 2021. So 3/1/2021 at 802 East 1050 South Street 300 American Fork, Utah, USA 84003. So to summarize, first, we have a company being formed out of Delaware, which is actually located in Utah, and the return address is to a Kate Fisher in Salisbury, North Carolina. The purpose is a mobile security surveillance platform as a service. Yeah, right. And the Incorporating Services Ltd. is the appointed agent. Ltd., of course, is limited, but nowadays we have so many European designation of limited running around, whereas the U.S. designation used to be LLC. 145 Baker Street, Marion, Ohio 43302. And verified oath to submit for incorporation application for license. You have a Bryce Higbee, Secretary of LiveView Technologies, just signed as a squiggle, as you can see there. Today's date from the signature is 10/15/2024, so that would be October 15th, 2024, and the expiration of the notary on it is January 19th, 2026, a KC Porter, Notary Public of Utah. But here's the Delaware section filing, which states that LiveView Technologies Incorporated is duly incorporated under the laws of the state of Delaware, is in good standing and has legal corporate existence so far as the records of this office show as of the 5th day of September 2024. And authentication number 2043222, that's 3 2s in a row, 53. So I don't know if that means that the company was actually formed in 2024. It doesn't say that it was specifically formed in Delaware. It's just listed that it was formed in Delaware in 2021, even though it's located in Utah and the return address is to somebody in North Carolina. So now that we've read all of that and we understand what is going on, in summary, foreign third parties are establishing an extensive surveillance network across the entire country with very suspicious motives at its core, and they're also incredibly paranoid of attack. All of that forms together to show that they have a state of mind, they're willful and knowledgeable, that they are in fact forming a surveillance attack against the country, and they know it. Otherwise they wouldn't be so afraid of adverse consequences. So they're obviously going to need some type of cover story. They're not going to come out and say what they're doing. They are going to make something up. And here we get an example of that. November 14th, 2024. Honorable Board of Supervisors, County of Los Angeles, 383 Kenneth Hahn Hall Administration, 500 West Temple Street, Los Angeles, California. Report back on illegal dumping and unregulated mulching through technology and cost-effective strategies. To concentrate enforcement resources on known hotspots for illegal dumping and improper land application of mulch and other organic waste. Their focus is on unlicensed dumping. That's very important to note. It is on anybody who is dumping stuff without written permission. That's it. That's their cover story. They're pretending that it has to do with the environment and other nonsense, right? Like this illegal dumping and unregulated mulching can lead, as in like it may, to environmental degradation, decrease property values, and increase public health risks. That is a very vague statement which says nothing and sounds like what they're trying to do is preserve so-called safety. Well, they're trying to preserve their safety, and they want to control people's behavioral habits. And in order to do that, they have to set up this extensive surveillance system under fraudulent pretense. Statistics indicate rising rates of illegal dumping in urban and rural areas. Anytime you hear that phrase preface, statistics indicate, some stupid garbage that means nothing is going to follow. So this is obviously written by some nitwit out of the university system, or maybe the so-called AI. The negative impacts include strain on municipal resources. Of course, it's very obvious what the focus is here. Education, work with industry stakeholders to develop information regarding the impact of illegal dumping, so lying. Provide clear information on the laws against illegal dumping and the penalties associated with violating those laws, coercion. Promote proper disposal methods in the reporting of these activities. That's it's just ridiculous, right? Create educational material for industry groups, law enforcement, the public, and the youth. Who talks like that? Who says the youth? Develop a consistent message for elected officials, law enforcement executives, community leaders, and business leaders. So there are, of course, all mouthpieces. Facilitate media interviews right along with deputies to highlight the issue. So that's called propaganda. Staged public displays, etc. Collaborate with local businesses and establish partnerships to create disposal options at reduced rates for residents. Yeah, right. This stuff is just insane. They want to charge you for everything. They want to manipulate your habits. They want to control and micromanage every minute detail of your lives, of everyone in the entire country. Illegal dumping is often done for economic gain, as the cost of taking waste to a landfill can be substantial. Yeah, of course, these individuals doing all this nonsense had no hand in making it substantial to dump at a landfill, even though all those places get, supported by so-called tax money, but yet you still have to go and pay while they're also taking money from you for the upkeep of such a place. It's just, this stuff's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous this continues to go on as well. LiveView Technologies LVT cameras. To combat this persistent issue, the deployment of 20 LVT security cameras at strategic locations within the Antelope Valley is proposed. There you go. That's what they want to do. These foreign third-party controlled surveillance systems will be set up under the guise, under the the cover story of unlicensed dumping and things like that. There's a lot more to their motives than just simply manipulating people's behavior and coercing them into paying for and disposing of certain things, whatever they may be, in so-called designated areas. After identifying problem locations and or receiving actionable intelligence, personnel will conduct illegal dumping operations. Each operation will utilize a 6-deputy team with an accompanying team sergeant. Overtime costs are approximately $94.17 an hour for deputies and $126.30 an hour for sergeants, totaling approximately $5,531 per 8 hours of operation for each station. So that's, of course, a bogus excuse for running a military exercise with, of course, the purpose of seeing how effectively their measures will work. Information from the public regarding unregulated mulching is paramount, and these practices often occur on private property in rural areas. That tells you a focus is private property in rural areas. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean their so-called private property in rural areas? Their control of the land? Well, it could have two meanings. It could mean what they're doing right now, which is coming in and devastating the areas and kicking people out and locals and everything, and so-called renovating the land and just turning it into a desert and destroying things and having arbitrary construction everywhere and all this other stuff, right? Building these massive lodges. And at the same time, it could mean the so-called King's Land stuff. You know, they want to corral humanity into a literal cattle corrals and ensure that everything else is under the, direct but also distant control of the so-called the investors, their property holdings. The visible presence of LVT security cameras discourages individuals from engaging in illegal dumping activities. Evidence collection, high-quality footage from LVT security cameras will aid in the identifying vehicles, license plates, and individuals involved. Geographic information, GIS, map illegal dumping and unregulated mulching locations to understand hotspots and trends to drive enforcement. Streamlined reporting systems create easy-to-use online portals for reporting illegal dumping and unregulated mulching incidents, reducing the time and resources spent on investigations. Collaborate with local businesses and establish partnerships to create disposal options at reduced rates for residents. Oh, I already read that part. So the next part is community awareness campaign to maximize the deterrent effect. Launch a campaign informing residents and visitors of the camera deployment and the penalties associated with illegal dumping. That's called coercion, of course. Reduction in reported incidents. Comparing the number of illegal dumping reports before and after camera deployment. Tracking arrests and convictions related to illegal dumping. So, obviously, there's some pretty nasty motives behind this activity. The signature has no date by Robert G. Luna, Sheriff, and April L. Tardy, Under Sheriff. That's not a real title. There is no such thing as an Under Sheriff. Of course, when you point that out, just like you say, an Undersecretary of Defense. There is no Undersecretary of Defense. There's no Undersheriff. Well, in a week or a couple days now, I'm sure there will be all sorts of stupid fake news reports everywhere talking about undersheriffs. And you have the Undersecretary of Defense now everywhere, broadcasted all over Wikipedia and all the different social media platforms, etc. And they say it's always been a thing. No, it has not. Anyway, there's no such thing as an undersheriff. That obviously is coming from the perspective of somebody familiar with the European Union. There they have undersecretaries. And they may even have undersheriffs. But either way, in the United States, we have never had so-called undersheriffs. This document is completely phony. Now, the important thing to note here is that this is all about controlling and curbing, as their cover story, non-licensed pollution. Which means that you can pollute with a license and absolutely destroy the entire countryside as long as you are given permission to do so. That is what they're saying, even though that's the cover story. That's the cover story, and what they're saying in the cover story is equally bogus, heinous, and wicked as everything else. So here we've got an attachment, LVT quote, number Q, that's in Queen, 23688. Quote prepared for LA County Sheriff's Department. Quote prepared by Wendy Vance. Quote subscription term 12 months. Quote expiration date 9/12/2024. So September 12th, 2024. Some things to note here is that the subscription prepaid has an MSRP of $3,495, a monthly total unit of $2,095, and a term total unit of $25,140. But the contract total listed here for the subscription is $502,800. So obviously we have some numbers missing there. Now the mobile mounting structure, Solar White, is listed as an MSRP of $0, quantity of 20, monthly total unit of $0, and a term total unit of $0, and a contract total of $0. Now the subtotal pre-tax is $574,800. So the $502,800 of that subtotal is the subscription. $72,000 is everything else. That's amazing. All quoted prices are listed pre-tax. LVT will make the services available through use of cellular data connectivity unless otherwise agreed to in writing. Customer will have access to 5 gigabytes of cellular data per month for a standard LVT Omni unit. Customer will have access to 15 gigabytes of cellular data per month for the LVT D3 security unit. Data usage will be reset to 0 on the first day of each month. Customers who go over their data usage will be charged $10 per gigabyte. Third-party alert response services packages. ARS standard up to 12 hours of alerting. Intermittent traffic will use audio for non-threatening alerts up to 15 alerts per day. ARS expanded, more than 12 hours of alerting. High traffic alerts for general surveillance and loitering are expected, 15 to 50 alerts per day. And here we got some stupid propagandistic promotional material nonsense. Here it states the D3 unit combines solar power and batteries with cellular connectivity and proprietary software to protect your property. Whose property? That's the big question in all of these statements. This seems entirely like it's to protect the overseas holdings of foreign interests, foreign third-party interests. It's their property, as they term it. Cloud-based automated alerts, email, SMS, active deterrence, floodlight, two-way speaker, and strobe lights. A loudspeaker, antenna, strobe light, edge controller inside. Considering the malicious intent behind this and the desire to control the land and the people, you would think they would have some type of ultimate, shall we say, contingency in place, such as some type of bomb, some type of extremely destructive weapon, where if all else fails, they can say, do what we say or else. Because that's what all of this is about. It's about do what we say or else. Power is 224V DC, 24 watts disarmed, 36 watts armed, and 100 watts max floodlight on. Solar generation is 800 watts and battery capacity is 460 AH. Perhaps those massive solar farms have something to do with their ultimate contingency, or they're simply just to destroy the land, the environment, and cause general upheaval and mayhem. The schedule, including the attached quote, together with that certain master SaaS and service level agreement buy-in between LiveView Technology, Inc.'s LVT, and LA County Sheriff's Department customer, dated as of January 1st, 2024. Sets forth the terms and conditions under which LVT will provide customer with product services set forth in quote below. Okay, so the customer in this context is the Sheriff's Department of LA County. I expect that pretty much every so-called sheriff's department throughout the country is a customer of this nonsense. And as many know, we've seen those stupid police badges stamped on the side of many of these bogus and treasonous surveillance units. Thank you.